And welcome everybody to another episode of Keeping It True by You Saints. So we're now entering the end of week 2, which is your first week with pads here at Saints training camp. And with 4 practices to go before the public session of training camp comes to a close and more game prep and season prep goes underway, we take a look at where we stand here. I feel like it's important to understand the Saints are starting to show a little bit more about themselves, and it's starting to become a little bit clear how this season might go, which is a little bit different than what a lot of people thought it would be, at least if you look real closely at what's going on in camp. Once again, everybody, this is Keeping It True by You Saints, where we talk about the latest things going on at the Saints facility, at the Superdome, and everywhere else that the Saints play football. So in this particular conversation, it has to start with the fact that the position battles are ramping up, but it's not necessarily in the way that we thought. While obviously the quarterback battle will start to play itself out more once game time begins, and right now reps are still split relatively evenly between the 3 quarterbacks. It goes to show that there are other positions that are going to be just as entertaining to watch as far as a who's to start, who's not to start position. And I think it's really going to come down to, that running back 2 spot is going to be an extremely competitive spot between Devin Neal, Kendre Miller, potentially some of the vets you have in Cam Akers and Clyde Edwards-Helaire, as well as a couple other pieces that are right there in camp. Obviously, you've had a bit of a rough go with the way how your tight end room is right now, and that wasn't necessarily shocking with you knowing that Taysom and Foster were going to come in on the PUP list. So far, obviously Juwan Johnson is your tight end 1, and what I think is the most exciting thing to see is that the chemistry is picking up between whatever quarterback it might be and Juwan Johnson. So you have a little bit less to worry about when it comes to that tight end spot. You look at particularly in the past couple days at camp, some very nice throws to him as far as the touchdown and red zone work goes. I feel like it was a very good showing by Juwan and the quarterbacks that they're in pretty good pace, so at least you don't have to worry about that position for the longer duration of the season. Maybe a couple first weeks it gets dicey, but I'm pretty confident in week 1. Now, you go and look at what I think as far as the offense lines up, it's going to be the most particularly competitive spot, which is who's going to be the second line wide receivers. Obviously, you have Olave, Rashid Shaheed, and Brandon Cooks being your wide receiver ones, quote-unquote, left-right slot. But whenever it comes to what's expected to come, and whenever those guys need to take a break, whenever those guys maybe miss a game or 2 for a muscle or, maybe a sprain, those are the positions that I think are really going to be bringing some of the most intense preseason action, number 1, but also early regular season action as these guys really try and nail down their spot. You're looking at folks like Bub Means, you're looking at Cedric Wilson, Mason Tipton, Dante Pettis, Kevin Austin has played really well so far in these early training camp practices. I feel like that's somebody who's making note. And then, you'll see what happens beyond that. I think those are the main names to look at. Particularly someone like a Bub Means you really thought would take a step in year 2, but you have other players that are certainly going out there and showing their best. And, I feel like it always comes down to, preseason wide receivers, man. Those are your heroes, and then all of a sudden you either see them or you never see them again. So, we'll look and see how that preseason, battle goes on for the wide receiver position. Personally, I'm excited to watch that. It's really going to be pretty pivotal to how, again, things develop for the Saints as you get into that first game against the Chargers, and then you return home to face the Jaguars in the Superdome to open up your preseason home slate. Going to be very exciting, and hopefully, everybody's there. It's very full for Kellen Moore's first game in the Superdome, although it is preseason. So, beyond that, of course, it is important that we look ahead, but first go ahead and look down wherever you're watching this. Hit that subscribe button. Follow if you're over on TikTok. Amazing numbers coming back from both of those sites, guys. I really appreciate what you guys are doing over there. Of course, don't forget you can take this podcast via audio only if you do prefer that, or you're driving somewhere and you don't have time to watch. Go ahead to your favorite podcasting hosting site, be it Spotify, Apple, or Amazon, any of the others, we're not here. We're not hating. So, go ahead and you can hit the follow over there, and you'll get every single episode wherever you listen to podcasts. Now, looking back to what I think is going to be your strong suits, you're seeing very strong line play so far. And sometimes you don't expect that whenever you get into these early stages of training camp. Sometimes some of those teams need to take a while to come together and really understand the format. You change to a 4-3 for your defense, while at the same time you're shifting basically your entire offensive line configuration. But at the same time, you have many of the same pieces, 4 out of 5 coming back, and you draft the best the best offensive tackle in college football to come in with the first round pick. So I think you look at how that's going, and Trevor Penning has not looked any better at any point during his Saints career than he is right now, playing in that left guard slot. Seems like it might be more of a natural fit for him, although he did, of course, have to play everywhere throughout his first couple years here. Then you have Talise Fuaga and now Kelvin Banks. It seems like those two are going to be absolutely the two guys for the future. So what you lost whenever you had, your previous set of left tackles go down, it kind of shows you that Mickey at least had the intentionality, and maybe it was an aspect of the Dennis Allen era as well, that while there was never that great intensity until this past year to get that quarterback early, it was pretty clear that there was already touches of a rebuild coming in the way how this offensive line has been shaped. You think about it, these guys are basically drafted almost in succession. Eric McCoy 2019, Cesar Ruiz 2020, then you had Trevor Penning in 22, and then Talise and Kelvin Banks in 24-25. So this has basically been consistent first or second round draft picks, one after another, that you're spending on the offensive line. And now, for better or worse, you've basically rebuilt it from the Drew Brees era. The only piece really sticking around to see the tail end was Eric McCoy. So that really shows you that it's the weirdest rebuild ever, where you kept so many pieces for so long, but at the same time, you really now are seeing how it's all folding together. And look, I still think Trevor Penning is not the strongest player to ever put, fingers down in the dirt, but honestly, I would hope that he does well in his new role at left guard. It seems like it's a natural fit for the guy. I'm really thinking this could be a pivoting point for his time with the Saints. It's very questionable to see if he does get a full contract extension and re-signs, but at the same time, man, you have to think if he can do well next to a dedicated and purpose-built left tackle. Now you have Talise moving over to his dedicated and purpose-built right tackle position. That really shores it up. Obviously, Cesar Ruiz and Eric McCoy have shown, particularly Cesar Ruiz, that he can play both the center and the guard position very well, and that Eric McCoy is, of course, a top-notch center in the league. I feel like if all of those guys stay healthy and you then get them the quality practice time they're getting against this defense, man, I feel pretty confident in that group. Now, will the players that are put in the skill positions around the line end up elevating, which is where the biggest question is for the Saints. That really determines, is this going to be a 3-win team or is it going to be an 8-win team? A lot of people will try and tell you that this team is not going to get above 4 wins, and I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't. But there is still enough of a core, there is still enough of a talent base to where if you get lucky in a couple games, what should be a 6-win season could swing 2 games to 8. I don't think that gets you in the playoffs, and I don't think if you're a Saints fan, you necessarily want to be there looking out, being one of the first, call it, use basketball terms, first 4 out of the playoffs. This is a team that you want to see with a top 10 pick, to be frank with you. You need to see them getting more talent. It doesn't necessarily have to be someone like an Arch Manning or Garrett Nussmeier coming up next year, but the Saints team has to find a way to continue to stack talent that will allow them to put around the cores that they've built out for this team. Look, you look over on the defensive side, you now have very strong pieces in Brian Brzee and Chase Young playing both sort of that inside role and now the outside role with Chase Young moving up to technically a edge or left outside linebacker. It kind of depends on what type of language you want to use there. Cam Jordan sort of moves back to the line while you now get to have, like I said, your younger guys. Then, of course, you also have people like Devon Gotcha, who's come in and shown great work. Good to see the local talents getting to play and get to highlight. So really excited what you have there. And I think that really goes to show that while a lot of people will tell you the Saints are in complete disarray, they have no idea what they're doing. While there may not be any answers right now for the quarterback position, you do have some very strong talent here. And look, Chase Young, for what it's worth, is not an old talent in the league. A lot of injuries, yes, by all means, a lot of injuries. But he's now healthy. He played, in my opinion, well enough to deserve the contract extension that the Saints gave him last year, showing that he can recover from those injuries. And if you see last year with a, maybe 5 to 10% performance increase, mostly in the sack department, I'm excited to have Chase Young on the team. I feel like that's a steal you got without having to spend the draft capital. Really like that player here. And then you pair it again with young talent coming in with folks like Danny Stutzman, who I think is going to be right there, 1A, 1B with Pete Werner. Those are two guys who really know how to move on the defensive side of the ball. And I hope that we see that training camp work translate to game work, and we'll certainly be looking to see how Danny does once preseason is underway. Outside of that, we know that the secondary is going to have to sort itself out. Lots of people moving around, of course, with Tyron retiring. It's a void that has to be filled. I'm not too worried about it. I'm going to talk about that more in the next episode. I don't want to bog down 2 episodes in a row what the secondary is going to do. Time will show, And then really one little thing to look at here. Charlie Smith, who is your kicker 2 at the moment, is starting to maybe show that he is not quite as consistent as he needs to be. And that does prove well for Blake Grupe, who, we talked about earlier in the offseason. Is Blake Grupe's time coming to an end? Is his number about to get called? Right now, even if he is safe because Charlie Smith is struggling, I feel like Blake Grupe is somebody who can still benefit from taking a step forward and pushing himself over the average point as far as NFL kickers go. You obviously aren't going to, I believe, use your draft capital in the next couple of years to go find one. But, man, if you can get Blake Grupe on again, just slightly above average, maybe top 12 in the league, that's where I feel like the Saints would be in such a stronger position. So, overall, just to recap here, a lot going on. Of course, you are just under about a week to go before Charger prep begins. You're going to see the Saints practice on Wednesday the 30th. Then they're going to practice over the weekend here in New Orleans at the facility on, of course, Airline. And then you go into the final local open to the public practice for this training camp, which is going to be again on Tuesday, August 5th. And from there, if you're able to get that done and you're able to go over to California and get ready for your first ever game with Kellen Moore wearing the head coach equipment, man, I'm excited to see what happens there. And I hope you all are as well. We'll be here to talk about it more next. And, of course, whenever that game gets going, we'll give you a full preview. Once again, this is Donald here with Keeping It True by You here on the True by You Sports Media Network. Thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next time. This has been a True by You Media production. This show is for entertainment purposes only and does not render legal or financial advice. Remember to bet responsibly. Distribution of this podcast is prohibited without the express written consent of True by You Media or its subsidiaries. Thanks for being true by us. We can't wait until next time we keep it true by you.